Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed my other videos for Time Stories of the game, my tutorial, my overview, and my sample gameplay video. Of course, if you have any comments or questions about those, feel free to leave them in the YouTube comments down below. This final video, I'm just going to give you my final opinions and my final thoughts of Time Stories of the game itself. Now, before I can give you a full opinion of Time Stories, there's a couple things you need to accept, and these are a couple different things that are a little bit harder to accept for the board gaming community, because the coolest thing about board games is their replayability, which is something that Time Stories 100% lacks. So it doesn't matter whether I give this a glowing review or if I pan this game, if lack of replayability is something that's going to bother you, that's something that you're going to have a hard time getting past in Time Stories. Because basically the best way to describe Time Stories is like watching a 2-hour movie. Every time you watch that 2-hour movie, the game is going to, or the movie is going to be that 2-hour movie every single time you play it. Except with Time Stories, it's kind of a choose your own adventure style, so basically it'd be like watching a movie and a couple times during the movie getting up and leaving the room for about 5 to 15 minutes, then coming back and resuming the movie. But here's the trick. It'd be like before the movie ends, about 15 minutes before the movie ends, stopping the movie and starting the movie all over from the beginning, and then doing that again, and maybe even possibly doing that again depending on how successful you are at playing the scenarios. If you have a lot of bad luck, you can end up playing them multiple times, 2, 3 times, and it'd be like literally like watching the same movie multiple times over and over and over again, walking out of the room at various different points, coming back in the room, so you're at least seeing what you're missing by playing multiple times, but again, you're still doing the exact same thing all over again, kind of like a glorified Groundhog's Day. Another thing you need to realize with Time Stories is that there really is no replayability with the game. You're basically going to play each one of these scenarios, whether it's the Marcy case, whether it's the Prophecy of Dragons, or whether it happens to be the Pharaoh expansion. Every one of these expansions you're probably going to be playing a couple of times, and once you beat them, there's no real reason to go back and play these expansions again. Now, I know this for a fact because I've done it. I've actually gone back and tried some of these expansions multiple times. And to be honest with you, after I've beaten these scenarios, I really don't have any reason to go back and play them through again, because the biggest thing with Time Stories and the biggest selling point with Time Stories is sitting down with a group of players, picking up each one of these location cards, looking at one of these location cards and discussing this card with the other players and trying to come up with a solution, a way to get through this mystery, trying to pool all your knowledge and sit down and try to figure out exactly what this mystery is, try to get to the bottom of this mystery and solve this mystery. But if you know what's going to happen, you solve the mystery. Basically, the only thing you're doing is sitting down and listening to everybody else talk about the game while you're trying to be as silent as possible, so you're not giving away hints, so you're not giving away clues, and so you're not ruining the experience for the other players. So yes, it is replayable in that aspect, but again, it's like reading a book. You can read a book multiple times, read the same book multiple times over and over and over again, but every time you read that book, it's still the same book. Just like Time Stories, every time you play those scenarios, it's still the same scenario over and over and over again, except it's more like a choose your own adventure book. Sometimes you're going to read the same page multiple times. Sometimes you're going to find new pages in your quest to get to the end of the book. The thing you got to consider, though, is that this is basically a $50 choose your own adventure book. So basically it's a $50 for maybe for 4 people if they all want to pool their money together to try to purchase the game. It's still a $50 expenditure, which could be a lot of money for basically a game that is even shorter than a lot of the legacy games. You look at games such as Pandemic Legacy, which you could probably get up to 18 hours of playtime out of. You have games such as Seafall, which is still coming out, which is still a little bit of an unknown, but I bet you're going to get more than 4 hours out of that, which is basically all you're going to get out of the Asylum case. And that's assuming that you do pretty terrible. Most people probably get about 3 hours of this game. If you're not doing so good, maybe 4, 5 hours tops, but I don't see anybody taking more than 5 hours to get through the Asylum case. So to be perfectly fair, while it's $50 for that 5 hours, I do have one thing I do need to mention to you. You really can technically bypass the Asylum case, and if you're not afraid of proxy things by using cubes or miniatures or anything like that, you really don't need the base set to enjoy any of the future expansions, such as the Marcy case, such as the Prophecy of Dragons, or any of the future expansions, because the nice thing about the game is the only thing the base box is giving you are these pawns, which can be easily replaced by miniatures, is giving you dice, which are pretty easy to proxy to. You can pretty much make up for those too. The time die can be easily made up for. You can track your time pretty easily too. So a lot of those things, if the price of $50 does seem really too high for you, but this is a game that intrigues you, because the idea of a group choose your own adventure with a very good theme, a very good story, is something that interests you, and some of these other cases are something that you may like playing, you can actually bypass the basic game, pick up some of the other expansions, and I'm sure Space Cowboys isn't going to be happy with me admitting that, but technically, so far I see no reason to actually own the Asylum case. unless you're trying to connect all these cases together, because there's a little bit of a storyline that's connecting all these cases. And to avoid spoilers, there is something in the Asylum that you're going to carry forward. But again, I don't think it's mandatory. I don't think it's something you have to do. And if that $50 is really something that's bothering you and you're really interested in this game, but you can't get past that $50, you can get these $20 and $25 expansions. Play the game still if you're not afraid to do a little bit of proxying. Now that we got past the potential negatives that anybody's going to have for Time Stories, and I'm going to have a barrier for that I really can't convince you if you can't get past those things. But if you get past those things, you're looking at a really fun, enjoyable experience here. Time Stories, I hate to say it, it's a lot of fun, and I hate using the word fun, but it's enjoyable. It is a group experience where all these players are playing through this mystery. They're working together trying to get to the bottom of this mystery, and whether the mystery is this Asylum or the other mysteries in the other cases, they work out really, really well, and they are very difficult, very challenging. And matter of fact, I want to find out whoever invented the pentagram puzzle and go over there and tell them how impossible it can be unless you miss some very obvious things. But that's besides the point. I'm not going to hammer on the fact that I had to replay the same scenario twice just because the puzzle was a little bit too obtuse for my group. Oh well. Anyways, talking about the game itself, the game is done very, very well. The puzzles can be very, very challenging. And the cool thing is I am noticing a lot of difference just between the first Asylum case and the Marcy case. Now the first case, the Asylum case, and again I'm trying to avoid too many spoilers here, it is a very, very complex, tight experience. It basically has what I like to describe as a perfect solution for it. And the chances of you getting that perfect solution are very, very small until you play through that scenario multiple times and try to figure out where the red herrings are, where the dead ends are, where the things are. They're going to be completely wasting your time. It is possible to win this game in one playthrough, but the chances of it ever happening are extremely slim. There's lots of stuff you have to go through and discover multiple times, lots of red herrings you need to chase down, lots of wild goose chases, and a very, very challenging puzzle that's going to require one person to pick up on one very small clue. And we're talking about a clue that's so small, so minor, that if one person picks up the card that involves the clue and they miss the minor detail, you will never solve the Asylum case, which is very, very challenging. And also one of the reasons why I'm very kind of annoyed with this situation. But I think it's a good start to the game system, a good start to the gameplay, and it kind of segues into my point, which is the Marcy case, which is starting to evolve the gameplay in a way that I really, really like. See, my problem with the Marcy case, my problem with the Asylum case is that the game is made too tight, too perfect, and then the players have to go through it too perfectly to try to solve the case. Whereas the Marcy case has multiple ways to win. You have more time units to go out there and discover everything, and you do feel like it's more of an open world. It feels less scripted, and it feels like you have much more choice in your situations, much more choice in how you can resolve everything. But the only small minor negative that some people may have with it is that the Marcy case does rely a lot more on the dice versus puzzles. So if you have a lot of problems with the dice, you're going to lose over and over again, do the roll of the dice, versus the Asylum case, which is one you're going to lose just because you're missing on that one minor clue. Now, so far, I really am enjoying the puzzles and the theme so far for the game. Now, granted, some of the themes are a little bit played out. Again, I don't want to give away too many clues or anything like that, but at least the third scenario looks like it's going to be much more unique and a little bit different and a complete departure from the earlier two cases. Your first case is an Asylum case. Your second case is you're trying to rescue a girl who could be the future savior for all of mankind. Again, not wanting to give away too many spoilers. Most of you probably already know what it's about because it's been all over the internet. But for those of you who don't and want a surprise, is basically you're trying to save a girl who's going to save the future of all of mankind. And then the third case is basically you're out there in a fantasy situation with wizards and dragons. It's an alternate world, but it's expanding the game and it's getting more complexity. The game is becoming more complex and more situations are happening. And like I said, I think it's pretty darn cool that it's already been hinted at, and we already see suggestions showing that every one of these scenarios is connected. They're all leading to some very, very large reveal, which should be really entertaining and should be a lot of fun. So the cool thing to say here is that while Time Stories is a short gameplay experience, it's kind of an expensive gameplay experience for what you get. While it's short and expensive, what you're getting is pretty darn awesome with some really cool gameplay, some really cool puzzles, and some really cool challenges. Just, you may be a little bit bothered with the fact that there's really not much gameplay in this box. The bottom line here for Time Stories, though, is that the positives far, far outweigh the negatives of the game. Yes, granted, you are paying $50 for one scenario that's going to be over in 4 hours, and yes, they definitely probably should have had 2 scenarios in the base box and charged $60. Yes, I understand art assets get expensive. I understand it's expensive putting a game together. But it's a hard sell to tell people to spend $50 for a 4-hour experience on a board game, especially for a board game. Heck, it's a hard sell for video games spending $50 for a 5-hour video game. We see how a lot of video games have failed just because of the fact that there's no replay built into the box. And that's something that Time Stories is going to have a little bit of trouble overcoming. Granted, the future expansions are getting better. They're getting longer. You're getting more replay out of them. And it's because you're getting more replay because the scenarios themselves are longer versus the Asylum case, where it's only a 3-hour scenario because you have to replay the darn thing so damn many times just to beat it. You literally, I want to bet most people are playing that damn scenario 3 times just to get through it. And it's a 45-minute to an hour top scenario, so you're basically doing the same thing over and over and over again in an effort to finally figure out the trick, figure out the puzzle, and get to the end of the game and beat that scenario. Whereas the Marcy case, you get more time units, you get more locations to explore, and you feel like you're less pressured by time and you're more pressured by your decisions. So it's kind of cool to see that the game is improving on that aspect. I also think it's very cool that they do have a creation kit available online for the game. You can download it. It has all the symbols so you can create your own scenarios, whether it's your mission cards, whether you need the borders to create all these different locations to create your own scenarios. And I know people are starting to create scenarios, so I think that's going to be very, very cool. It's going to add a lot more replay and a lot more variety to the game over time, making us a much better package as time goes on, as more scenarios come out, as more replay comes out, and more enjoyment comes from the game. The scenarios so far are entertaining. They've all been enjoyable. They've all been different, and they're slowly getting better and better as time goes on, making Time Stories a better purchase as time and time goes on. There's just a couple more points I want to cover before I close out this review. The first thing that I want to cover is that this game is going to be best played with 4 players. Now, the game box does list that the game is for 2 to 4 players, and the game is okay with 2 players. And in my opinion, the 2-player variant is just a band-aid to make you enjoy a 3 or 4-player game. This game plays good with 3 players, fantastic with 4 players, because the whole idea of the game is for all the players to interact, to talk together, and try to figure out and puzzle through this mystery. As a matter of fact, the 2-player game is just basically one person controls 2 receptacles and the other player controls the other 2 receptacles. Not really a 2-player game, especially since it goes against the whole spirit of the game. Matter of fact, using the logic of that band-aid for the 2-player game, you can pretty much say this is also a solo game. So they could have put on the box that the game does play 1 to 4 players, but I'm kind of going on a tangent here. The other thing I want to impress upon you is that this game is very, very mature. There is nudity of the upper half, there's naked women. I'm just going to be blunt. There's some naked women on some of the cards you're going to see in both of the scenarios. There's some mature themes such as cocaine use. There's very mature themes in the second scenario involving blood, dismemberment. I don't want to give away too many gory details, but basically I want to say that the theme for the first 2 scenarios is on the darker side. Definitely something you want to point this towards the more mature, the older crowd. Now, some countries have less of a problem with nudity than other countries, but I do want to emphasize that there are some dark themes such as cocaine use, cannibalism, psychosis, murder, sacrifice, and that's just the first scenario, not even getting into any other scenarios. So I just want to let you know that there are those dark aspects of the game. I want to let you know the game does play better with more players. And also want to let you know that there may be a slight issue with players who have different abilities to see different amounts of color. Because there are some requirements where you're required to find some of these tokens, and these tokens are going to let you know about which different sections are going to unlock for the board. And even myself, who I have no problems with seeing different colors, I even had a problem distinguishing between these 2 colors in a less than well-lit room. So that could be a little bit of a problem. You may end up getting the wrong tokens, or you may end up flipping over the wrong cards because some of those colors look a lot the same. Other than that, I do recommend Time Stories. There are a lot of negatives for the game, but again, I want to emphasize, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. If you can get over the fact that there's no replay value, if you can get over the fact that it's a little more expensive for a 4-hour experience, you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun with Time Stories. I hope you enjoyed this video series for Time Stories. If you have any comments or questions, as always, leave them in the YouTube comments down below. You can also send me an email at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching. Floating cat. Floating cat. There's a floating cat. Psst. Hey, don't you dare not listen to me when you're not supposed to listen to me and do exactly what you're not supposed to do when you're not supposed to do it. Cat. Hey, psst. See this? See this? You're blocking that. You don't care. Okay.